Hi, everybody. It's me, Dr. Hamilton. I got to campus uh, a little while ago, I guess around 9 o'clock, and I'm looking out the window and it's snowing. Exciting. Of course, yeah, we'll enjoy it while it lasts because it's not going to last long. Anyway, so here I am in Neville Hall, and I believe I am the only human being in the building. It's really interesting. Not a car in the parking lot, not a single person in the hallways. So what I'm creating here is a mini lecture that's going to guide you through completing your first homework assignment, which is the annotation assignment due Monday. Please, watch this through the end. And I'm going to switch screens now because I just want to sort of introduce you to, what we're doing. Hang on just a second, sharing. And I'm going to move things around. So here, desktop 2. So I'm going to be switching between your the course homepage and my document camera, which is going to allow me to share documents with you, and also a few documents that I sent you guys online. Oh, sorry, I just realized I haven't shared yet. That always happens. Anyway, I think you can see that screen now, right? Yeah, you should be able to see that screen now. So I'm going to be switching between the course website, which I sent you guys the link to, and my document camera, which is going to allow me to share some documents but be more transparent about my process with you, share my process so you can understand why I am, asking you to do the things that I'm asking you to do. So let me get everything arranged here. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible so that I can get on the road before the weather gets really bad. Here's the homepage. There are various sections on this homepage. Here's the front page, the instructor information, the books that we are reading, a little bit about me. I forgot to mention that, I'm a really good cook, and our class falls during Mardi Gras, and I'm especially a good Louisiana cook. So if you're very, very good, you may get gumbo for Mardi Gras. The other course resources are linked here, and we could navigate either down here at the bottom of the page or up here at the top. I'm just going to use the top menu. So here are course requirements. This is basically repeating the syllabus. Student learning objectives, the things that you're being graded on, guidelines for completing the assignments, right? The way that I want things to be submitted, the way I want them to look when you turn them in, and the schedule of readings. And this is really the reason why I keep the course website, because things are constantly changing. For example, I'm sorry for this quote got cut off at the top. What it actually says, it's a quote from Jean-Luc Godard, who is a French New Wave filmmaker and widely considered to be a genius. But he's asked, but surely a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he says, of course, a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. So we're going to find artists who subscribe to that method throughout the course of the semester. And as I said, things are so here's the thing to pay attention to. Of course, things are constantly changing. For example, today we're supposed to be doing our diagnostic exam and reading contract review. Well, that didn't happen. So what I'm going to do is cut and paste. I'm going to move this here down to here, week of January 13th. This allows me to keep up with changes in our schedule. And, stuff is always happening to change the schedule. Here's something to pay special attention to: the schedule of due dates. Our first assignment, annotation 1, January 13th. That's Monday. So I think that's pretty much, oh yes, of course. Course policies. These are things that you need to generally know. Absences, lateness, AI, assignments, disabilities, honor pledge, late work, plagiarism, and so on. All of that is on this page. And I did not include this stuff in the version of the syllabus I handed out in class. Generally, we've been getting so many of these policies that I end up having 10-page syllabi. So this is why I put this stuff on the web as well. And then there's a section on the final project when we get to that, but that's sometime in the future. Let's go back to here. Course requirements. I just want to point out this element in particular, your reading and research journal. Because this assignment, the annotation assignment, goes hand in hand with your reading and research journal. One of the things that I'm trying to get you guys to do is to, analyze your reading process and transform your reading process. And part of that transformation involves transforming the way you approach a text in order to, to work with it, to take notes on it, to glean, answers and knowledge from it. And so that's what these annotations are intended to show you how to do. Okay, I'm going to skip over. I think that's it. I'm going to pause for just a second. Sorry. Okay, back now. I just needed to rearrange my windows on my computer screen. So let's talk about that reading process quickly. What is your reading process? We talked about this a little bit on Wednesday. Do you read in a quiet room or wherever you happen to find yourself, whether it's noisy or not? Do you read a text once and move on? Or do you try to analyze it to understand its significance? How do you make notations to yourself about things that you think are significant or important about a text? Or do you just not even bother with that? Do you expect me to tell you when we get to class? So this class is privileging that initial encounter with the text, and it's going to try and transform what you do with the text through transforming your note-taking practice. So note-taking has been a pet peeve of mine for years. Most of you don't do it. I can stand in front of a class giving the most intricate lectures, making points that are not at all obvious, that I know for a fact 24 hours later, you will not be able to repeat to me in your own words. And if you try, you will mangle it hopelessly, right? But the entire class is looking back at me, earnestly trying to convey the impression that they're paying attention. But out of 20 people, maybe 2 are taking notes. Right? Those 2, of course, are the ones who are going to wreck the curve. They're going to ace the test. They're going to ace the paper. They're going to create a final presentation that blows everyone out of the water. And the reason that they're going to be able to do that, you may attribute to them just having superior ability. It's not that. I mean, that might be a part of it, but a huge part of it is that they have a much more effective practice. They're writing things down. So what I'm going to do is share my practices with you. I brought in some, old resources, some old notes, notebooks that I used that when I was in graduate school, when I discovered this method, not new, this method of note-taking and studying that, has become just really, really important to me. So hang on just a second, and I'm going to switch screens one more time. Yay. So you should be able to see this now. So what these are notebooks from graduate school when I was learning how to do this stuff, how to do research and how to incorporate research into my writing without absolutely driving myself crazy in the process. So this notebook is from 1995, 96, when I was working on an oral history project at the University of Virginia. This was during my graduate training. And you'll see that that the oral history project involved interviewing people uh, about their memories of integration at the University of Virginia. And you'll see I started out doing something like this. Here's a date, the people that I interviewed, details where they lived, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also like textual analysis that I'm having to do as well. So, so this is both for this whole notebook covered interviews. It covered which is sort of like a lecture situation. You're just trying to write down everything that the person says, because you don't know yet what's significant, and you don't know where the good quote is going to be. And then and those interviews were backed up by tape recordings also, but also all the books that I read to try to understand the historical context of the time that we were dealing with. So step back a little bit. So you'll see here is my notebooks. Basically, I'm writing everything down, whether it's readings or not. And then I'll go back from time to time and I'll highlight, right? But you'll see the problem with this method of note taking is that it's if you just sort of open up to a random page, it's impossible to tell what's important. It's impossible to tell what needs to be emphasized. I have to sit down and read every word. And my handwriting is not always that clear. Read every word to figure out what I need to take out of this section of the text. So and I do this for basically this is that whole year and a half of notebooks. Lots of notes, a few highlights, right? Sometimes things in different colors. Well, okay, so within not very many years, I have discovered an alternate method that works a lot better. This notebook is from 2000, and this is from the year when I was doing my oral exams and preparing to write the prospectus for my dissertation. So during this process, the number of books that I'm responsible for reading and being not just reading, but being able to teach from is jumping exponentially. And so I have to find a method that's going to be better than just writing everything down and highlighting, right? And so eventually I get there, right? You see me starting to diagram a little bit here, starting to make, little boxes. Well, that's something that's going to lists and boxes. Eventually, I kind of, even though I kind of launch from the page and start creating little bubbles and arrows to indicate significance. Now, instead of having to read every word, I've got keywords, I've got key names, I've got locations, I've got symbols, I've got, images, I've got things that I can connect together to begin to build a picture of what's going on. I'm still free writing in between to try and figure out, what it is I'm reading, but the notes that I'm starting to take are starting to look like this. And instead of, pages that are just nothing but text. Suddenly I've got pages that are guiding me through texts. So here is the title of the text that I'm working with, the date that it's from, author, who does the photographs, a few blocks with key passages, and then I start mind mapping. This section says, think of others. And these are texts that are comparable from the same period that deal with the same kind of material. The time period, the Depression, aspects that are important from the Depression. This one, growth of urbanization, and that how it connects to all of these different things in the past and in the contemporary moment. So instead of this just massive text, what we've got instead is a kind of flowchart action where I can highlight, I can create flashcards, I can do all kinds of stuff. I have a lot more choices now than when I just had that giant block of text and I was trying to figure out what to say, what to do about it. So yeah, that learning that type of note-taking transformed my process. And in fact, this book, which I published back in June, would not have been possible without learning that kind of practice, because so much material had to be, consolidated and brought together. So much historical context, so much cultural context, so much context from so many different disciplines, music, visual art, as well as literature. Anytime you're doing something that's really complex, the more shortcuts that you can find to help you through it, the better. Okay, so there's a couple of more things that I want to sort of like point out. So I'm going to share a little bit more from my process, and then we'll talk about the annotation assignment itself and what I expect you to do. Okay, we're back to the dot camera. So this is how it should look, right? Here are some notes that I have taken. And here is, okay, give me just a second. And here is the reading that those notes were associated with. This is for a class that I was teaching on Southern women's writing. And the text is about gender role attitudes in the Southern United States, right? And so you see that this text has, some annotations, not some highlighting, right? Highlighting here and here. And then there's whole sections that are not of interest, not as much of interest, more highlighted here and here. So basically what I have done with this reading is gone through, selected out the stuff that is most germane to what I'm trying to teach in this class. And I've created a little schematic. And this is what it looks like. This is a modified version of the Cornell Notes system. You don't have to be, it's not as strict in terms of the way the page is divided up. That's all really up to you. But this is the same idea. Here are the passages, significant passages with page numbers, 2 significant passages, and here is the beginning of a mind map. Genteel lady myth, how that is related to, these quotes on these 2 pages. And then I have examples of the genteel lady myth branching off at the top. On subsequent pages, oops, this one went upside down. Another 749, another, the key points from that, and then sort of how that maps together with other things I might be interested in talking about in this lecture. And comparisons between the North and the South. similarities, differences, lies. And, sort of like basically it's creating a flow through the page so that it's easy for me to review. It's easy for me to get my key points. I can actually get up and lecture from this, right? But I usually don't. Usually when I am, doing something like this, what it ends up doing and it ends up looking like is not this one, something like this, right? All right, so here is, I love Tracy. I'll just say really straight out, I love grid paper because I like being liberated from the lines, right? So this is big fat grid paper. And this is when I was developing a lecture for an American modernism class in poetry. And so this kind of schematic, I start out with Eliot and Pound, who are outsiders, who admire the empire, admire Britain, and kind of take over Britain. But then, so they're like the moderns that we know, but there are all these other modernist movements going on all around the world. This schematic allows me to understand that conceptually. So, and I've got here moderns and postmoderns, right? And examples of all of that. This is I do it in different colors just to make it easier to read. If everything's the same color, then I can't really isolate contrast. So there's no real system to it. These are just the pens that happen to be in front of me, and this is what I did with them. But this kind of messy looking thing that, as you can see, has gotten wet, and this turned into this handout comparing modernism and postmodernism, and sort of like these bullet points. So you see the connection between good process, a good note-taking process, and a good product is pretty indisputable. The final thing that I wanted to share is this is just a little thing that I create to sort of like when I'm just a cheat sheet. I was teaching Huck Finn. These are the chapters that we're focusing on, 12, 15, 17 through 18, right? And so to help me navigate these chapters more easily, I just made a little quick schematic. Chapter 12, the main action is A, C, and B. I just wrote these things down. And then I put them in the order, so as you can see. The most important thing that happens in that chapter is the rec, right? I put page numbers that are relevant next to the action. I put the names of characters. And that's because I have so much stuff in my head, and I'm teaching multiple classes at the same time. Sometimes it's just really helpful just to have this in front of me so that, if I forget, it's Mrs. Watson, who's the character who is featured in this chapter. Oh, it's right there. So that I don't just end up going, oh, the lady who was mean, who like made Huck learn his prayers, never mind. Right. I actually have a little, so, I did this with a whole book. And lectures, it thinks elements that I wanted to emphasize in lecture. So I'm going to stop for just a second. Let's pause and kind of catch our breath. So yeah, this annotation assignment that I have given you is about presenting you with something quickly that you can use right now, that will help you with this aspect of your schooling. It's something that I feel that students really need a lot of assistance with. So let's go back to the dot camera and talk about what we're using this, all of these materials to do. Okay. So the three documents that I emailed you are this document, the primary text of the learning to read section from the autobiography of Malcolm X. This, which is the layout or a template page for the Cornell note-taking system, which is basically the note-taking system that I had sort of like evolved toward using, and that I later understood, oh, this is what I'm doing. So I'm going to teach you the Cornell system first, so that you don't have to go through all that trial and error that I did. And the instruction sheet that give you the instructions for how to annotate a text. So what I was showing to you was a visual note-taking system, because when you are there needs to be this interplay between visual and text, right? Uh, for learning, it facilitates learning. It also is brain research has shown that when you're trying to memorize things in a text, it's easier if you can remember where in the text something happened. Like say, everybody's had the experience, I'm sure, of looking for a quotation or looking for a section of a book that you're trying to, either for a paper that you're writing or for a point that you want to make in class, and you can't do it. So you're flipping, and you say, oh, wait, I think I remember that was at the top of the page or the beginning of a chapter, right? And then you will look for, and your search will then become a search for pages, flipping pages, and looking just at the top of the page for the quote, or in the middle of the page, or the bottom of the page, whatever your recall is. Our recall of things is improved if we can place them in a location. So that's what the note-taking system, Cornell note-taking system, is based on. The page is divided up into three main sections for taking notes. The title section is just for taking titles. And these red numbers are just lined up with the 5 R's, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the instructions. So otherwise they're not, they don't matter. But yeah, so visual note-taking system based on neuroscientific findings to the effect that placement on a page affects recall, developed in the 1950s by a Cornell professor. The system divides your pages into 4 sections. You've got the section where you record your notes, the section where you record your cues, the section where you record your summary, the section where you put all the information about the text that you're working with, right? So there's a 5-step process. Record your notes here. Reduce the notes to keywords and cue words here. Return to this section to match up your keywords with your text. And then you can also, kind of like take it a step further. You can cover this up and use your cues to sort of like see if you can remember what the factoids related to them are. You can sort of like create your own flashcard system that way, right? Once you've done all that, write a summary of what you think is going on in your own words. And the 5 is come back to this page repeatedly, over the course of the semester, either as you're, moving toward the test or moving toward the final exam. This becomes, just an incredible resource for review and refreshing your memory of what happened in class. Okay, so when you are, so there's there are certain shortcuts that you can use to improve and help your encounter with the text. For example, when you're reading, the first thing you should do is circle or underline words you don't understand. vocabulary is so key. So many of you, if you were, I've heard students say, well, if I looked up all the words, I'd be looking up every other word. Of course, they're exaggerating. But what that tells you how little of the text they're understanding if they're not looking up every word and making sure, right? So, you know, it's the garbage in, garbage out principle. If your method of encountering the text is garbage, then you're not going to get you're going to get the same garbage results when it's time to be graded. Another thing that you can do with the text, because I advise breaking up analysis of the text into multiple reading sections. Don't try to just, you know, gut it through, especially if it's a difficult reading, right? So while you're, I recommend previewing the text, and I'll explain that in a minute when we get to talking about the Malcolm X reading in detail. Previewing the text, then on your preliminary read, you just put like little symbols in to indicate, you know, for you to come back to this section. This is important. A star or a heart if there's a really good quote. This you can't really, maybe you can't see this, but this is like the don't go, the no-go symbol, right? It means slow down. The material is hard. For any symbol for a main point or a theme, it could be an arrow. I just put a dark, a filled in circle, a main point or a theme, you know, of the text. Another symbol for a subpoint or an example, or, you know, in a literary text, an image or a symbol, an exclamation point. This is a reminder that you need to take further action. Maybe you really got to look up this term, or you want to make flashcards, or you want to ask a question in class, right? So the shortcut system is really helpful in making those initial annotations. So then, let's see, anything on the back that I need to mention. So the back of this handout is important because it gives you more stuff on the difference between taking notes and extracting cues when you're reading versus when you're in lecture. And it also gives you some guidance, a system for how to extract study cues. So that's going to be good, and that's going to be helpful. And I think now, so I want to show you how this looks. This is just a sort of like little schematic version. I created a template that this is light, so you can just write over it, right? And the idea is you're supposed to do your notes on longhand. So you here's the notes, big fat section. Don't feel the need to stay in the lines unless you want to. I'm not a big one for staying in the lines. I kind of tend to write bigger because I'm writing fast a lot of times. Put your cues over here. Use arrows or whatever to match up your cues with your notes if they're not exactly side by side. This is a two-page one, a two-pager. Here's your summary down at the bottom. Any reasonably complex, you know, reading, you're going to be able to fill this up. It might actually take you a couple of pages. So just print out as many of these as you need. And when you hand in your assignment, what you're going to hand in is this page filled out, and also this page, your Malcolm X reading with annotations. Now here, when I talked about previewing a text, so especially a complex text, a text that's from a different historical time period, you want to sort of like prepare yourself. So here's your title. There's a little bit of explanatory text at the beginning. You want to read that. And then to preview a text, whether fictional or nonfiction, read the first paragraph, read the last paragraph. That gives you an idea of where you're starting and where you're heading. And then just read the topic sentence, the first sentence of every subsequent paragraph. And that will tell you get an idea, a sense for how the argument is developing or how the story is developing, how long of a slog this reading is going to be. It helps to prepare yourself for what's coming. So you just do that preview, don't do anything on the preview. The next stage is when you're doing the first initial reading. And here, I just put these symbols on the side, and they don't correspond to the symbols that I put on the shortcut key. You can put anything you want. One of my favorite symbols is just the arrow. As you're reading, you don't want to do anything other than like circle the words that you feel like you need more, that you need to look up. So you circle the words that you encounter you're not sure of. And then something that you see that you think is important, you can just stick an arrow by it. So then you'll come back, when you're creating the notes from the reading, and then you can turn that into whatever that arrow was for. You can put a little summary or a little cue on your notes page that directs you to that. You can also put page numbers on your notes page so that it simplifies your process of going back to re-engage with the text. So an arrow or an X with something that maybe you just really disagree. You think this author just kind of like didn't get it at all. And this, believe it or not, is a heart. It's a pretty terrible heart. A heart beside something that you absolutely adore. So that is the way that I'm advising you to proceed with this assignment. So the final thing that I want to share is why we are doing this particular reading and what I want. I'm hoping that you're going to get out of it. Hang on just a second. Let me get things set up. Okay, we're back. Yeah, why are we doing this reading? It goes back to that moment in my introductory lecture where I talked about the founding fathers and the role that reading played in the early republic and the role that they imagined reading playing in the life of our democracy. So the point to be made is that reading is actually a countercultural action, right? In reading, you develop yourself as an independent thinker, not somebody who follows the crowd, not somebody who follows fashions, not somebody who's easily fooled, somebody who is wise, hip to the ways of the world, and positioned to do the right thing, right? The founding fathers were regular people from all walks of life, mostly middle class, some very wealthy. Some were just, regular Joes, artisans, not necessarily educated people, but they were readers. In fact, they became revolutionaries because they were readers. They were reading philosophy. They were reading John Locke. They were reading about ideas like natural rights. And they were developing a philosophy that every human being had inalienable rights. As Jefferson said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those were ideas that were developed in concert with Jefferson's reading. John Locke elevated life, liberty, and property. Jefferson said, there's got to be something higher than property. So he made it about happiness. But so Thomas Jefferson is hilarious to me. He liked to brag that ours are the only farmers who read Homer. And of course, he counted himself as among those farmers who read Homer. But he really believed that what he said in a letter in 1807, the field of knowledge is the common property of all mankind. He also said, the more ignorant we become, the less value we set on knowledge and the less inclination we shall have to seek it. For him, the most important thing that they as founding fathers could do for the next generation was to provide them with the education that would allow them to uphold the republic. So the reading that I have given you is in line with that. Malcolm X is a man who became a revolutionary because he read. He was a common criminal with had a tragic background, tragic family life, no education to speak of, and turned to a life of crime because he was extremely intelligent, but had this giant chip on his shoulder and thought the world owed him a living. Through reading, first with his encounter with the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad and the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. So those early readings helped to shape his view of the world. This guy's a Christian, raised by good Baptists, but he converts he becomes a Black Muslim and later converts to Islam proper through his desire to read, to learn, to grow. And that's an important point that I want to make about this reading, is that this is a milestone in the development of his character, where he basically learns to love the dictionary. Basically, that's what he's writing about, learning to love the dictionary. But it's not the end point. He still has far more learning and growing to do. There's going to be some stuff in this reading that is going to challenge you, that may be triggering to you, that may enrage you. So write that down, right? Make that part of your notes. Why does he feel this way? Why is he saying these things, right? That's part of it. You argue with the text, as I said. I want you to get into a fight with an author if you have to. Wrestling with the text is the first step to mastering the text. So we want to invite you to a world of mastery through mastering the art of note-taking. Anyway, I've been here long enough that the snow has stopped and then it's come back as wintry mix. So I've got to get out of here. But thank you guys for your attention, and I'll see you in class on Monday.